Okay, on va commencer. Bon après-midi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Faculty Council and Town Hall. My name, for those who don't know, I'm David Eidelman. I'm Vice Principal Health Affairs and Dean of the Faculty of Medicine, and it's my privilege to be the chair of this meeting. Here is our agenda, and first there's going to be welcoming remarks. Then we have to approve the agenda, which is one of the few things on which we need to vote today. And then we'll do in memoriam. So the agenda, you have the agenda before you, and I need a mover and a seconder. This is how I find out if people are actually awake. Dr. Robert and Dr. Tonin, all in favor? Any against? No? Okay, good. First, I'd like to welcome some new members to the Faculty Council. You see their names there. You can see they represent quite a wide spectrum of the faculty from many different departments, including in administration. So thank you all to those who have agreed to join. It's really appreciated. And we also have some new student reps whose names you can see here, representing the different professional schools, basic sciences, and graduate studies. And we have some members who've agreed to be on key committees. The two key committees of this Faculty Council are the Steering Committee, and you can see there's a new rep from the medical undergraduate program, Rami, who's actually here, residents, basic science, and Leah Moss, who is the new successor. Dimitra used to be here, but now we have Leah. So maybe just stand up so people know who you are. So Leah Moss is my senior advisor, and those working on committees will get to know her. There's also the nominating committee and from the School of Physical and Occupational Therapy, which I notice it says POTUS, which is President of the United States, so obviously a very important person. All right. So for those who are new, it's a tradition before starting the meeting to remember those who have passed, and I'd ask for a moment of silence. Thank you. So first up, now in most business meetings that you go to, the meeting starts off with things like the minutes of the previous meeting and all kinds of business stuff. But we decided that it was important to make the early part of the meeting where we have the maximum attendance as interesting as possible. And so we've asked that we have presentations first. And we try and have presentations from students or other learners at every one of these Faculty Council meetings, as well as presentations related to either research or education. And so we had a proposal for a very, very interesting project that has been organized by medical students. I'm told that this is not actually part of the curriculum of the medical undergraduate program, but is a community engagement project that medical students have undertaken. And I'm going to, I would ask the speakers to come up and take it away. And make sure that you introduce yourselves.
Okay. Hi everyone. Good afternoon. So first, I would like to thank the Faculty Council for inviting us to speak. This is an initiative that we hope to present to you. So first, I'm Kenzie, and this is my colleague Daria, and we will be presenting MedCom. I'm a Med 3 student, and she's a second-year medical student. So who are we? Basically, MedCom is an initiative that was inspired by one of our CHAP programs, Phone Tree. So CHAP is when we have to perform some community service hours during second-year medical school. And last year, myself, Elie, Jenny, and Ellen, we're part of Phone Tree. And what Phone Tree hoped to do was to get us, medical students that speak a different language other than English or French, to perform interpretation at clinical encounters. And I found that initiative fantastic because, one, I love to speak my mother tongue, which is Egyptian Arabic. I love to meet Egyptian families, and I was very excited to be in a clinical setting early on and to just experience experience the clinical setting. And but however, there was a lot of limitations in that in that phone tree project because just due to different logistical things, which is what inspired Medcom. And we're gonna discuss later how Medcom would be different than phone tree. So during this year, we also included new Med 2 students, so Daria and another student, Shui. So the idea is that we would like to develop a multi-sided platform, and we're going to give you a sneak peek later of basically like a website or application where medical professionals can book for interpretation, and that interpretation will be provided by medical students that are able to speak a third language. And this would help in sort of like connecting these two groups. The idea is that we would also train the medical students to be qualified interpreters, and we would help connect exactly like medical health professionals with the trained medical students and provide a sustainable year-round, easily accessible interpretation for unilingual patients of Montreal. So the idea is that we would have many students involved, not just, but for now be the CHAP students. And the idea is that it would run year long, and it would be very easy to access. You'll get to see a sneak peek of what we've worked on, what that online platform would look like.
So as mentioned, the inspiration came from the CHAP project last year, and the students who volunteered in the communities identified the need for professional trained medical interpretation. And following many talks and consultations with the wider community of MUHC, a further need for the interpretation at the urgent care settings has been identified. Yeah, I don't have to remind you that we live in a multicultural and diverse city of Montreal, and there is a clear need for interpretation here. So the 22% of Montreal report their mother tongue to be other than French or English. 12% speak something other than English or French at home, and in the most recent census, over 63,000 people have declared that they're unilingual and don't speak either French or English. And a lot of these will be accessing healthcare services and facing major language barriers. Further evidence of the need for medical interpretation comes from the MUHC and our healthcare system itself, as evidenced by just last year, over 500 documented intercoms were documented, and over 4,000 requests for professional interpretation service at the Children's, which is, as you'll learn in a bit, is the only site that actually has in-house medical interpretation service. How are these needs addressed currently? Right now, as I said, Montreal Children's Hospital is the only hospital in the English system that has an established in-house interpretation service. They hire interpreters who then go through in-house training, and this service is covered for the patients by the hospital. Unfortunately, this is not available for other sites, including the adjacent Royal Victoria Hospital, in the community, there is a service, there's a bank of interpreters that some physicians are aware of and are using, but there is no universal solution, one. Two, even the professional, well-trained interpreters that are available at the Children's are not, the scheduling behind it doesn't work for the urgent care setting, so there's no solution for ERs and ICUs, and what does happen is that we often, like a lot of you probably experienced, is an intercom calls that are done and then a layperson is recruited to interpret. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that that is not an ideal solution and can introduce more problems than benefits. A recent systematic review have showed that the use of ad hoc, non-trained medical interpreters actually leads to more medical errors, and 1 in 40 malpractices in the US is linked to misinterpretation. Evidence also supports that the use of trained medical interpreters can improve communication and improve health outcomes, and there are some schools in the US that have established a training for medical students and established a service of medical interpretation by medical students and have shown that it works. There is positive feedback from both physicians and patients. And then there's some added benefits for the students themselves as they practice their communication skills, improve their empathetic skills, and get a better understanding of what are the barriers that their future patients experience when they seek healthcare. So with all of that in mind, we decided to reflect back on our class and see what do we have to offer to solve the need for medical interpretation. And so over the last year, we have launched a call for multilingual speakers within within medical school, and we had over 100 students signing up, willing to interpret as requested. All of them in total speaking over 28 languages. And I think this really shows that with proper training and coordination, medical students at McGill are a valuable resource and a viable solution for medical interpretation training. We do want to emphasize, though, that we're by no means are seeking to replace professional interpretation service when such is available, such as at the children's in non-urgent care setting, because we are a population of medical students who are mainly training to be physicians and serve our communities in other ways. But while doing so, we really think that there's an opportunity to use our multilingual talents to help unilingual patients. So what are we doing now? We started our first pilot project through which we want to test how our the training. Sorry, we'll back up for a second. So what we've done over the summer, we developed a training of how to interpret and how to be an interpreter in the medical care setting, targeted at the medical students. So we reviewed a lot of evidence and a lot of trainings that do exist out there, and actually a big chunk of a medical interpretation training is medical knowledge, which, as many of you would know, we as medical students already possess. So what we do need to train our students on is on the ethics and responsibilities of interpreting and basic rules of what differentiates interpretation setting from any other healthcare setting. So having developed that training, we want to test how well we've done, and we're doing this with a pilot project through the CHAP volunteering initiative this semester. So we have 8 second-year medical students who speak a total of 10 languages, who will be serving as interpreters at the CLSC Park Extension, as well as a few other locations within a healthcare network. They will undergo a 2-hour training on interpretation, as well as additional sensitivity training on how to work with refugee populations, a population that are likely going to be most of their clients throughout volunteering. And our goal is to collect collect feedback from the students on how well our training prepared them, and 2, collect feedback from the physicians who are coordinating and accepting the students to see how realistic is the use of medical students for interpreters in the context of Montreal specifically. So as we mentioned, we also would like and are working on development of an online platform that could be used to request these medical student interpreters and would greatly facilitate the coordination. Unfortunately, due to funding constraints, the application is not ready to be used in our first pilot project, but we hope to that by the next pilot project, which I will describe in a second, we will have that online platform. And I'll just let Kenzie introduce the platform quickly.
Yeah, so here I'm going to show you just a quick sneak peek on what we've worked on so far. It's basically phase 1 of the project with the team that we're working with to develop it. So this would be basically an application, a cell phone application. It would also be a website, which I'll show you in a second. And we spent a lot of time trying to think of different things of when we want to make it user-friendly. So we were thinking first, would it be better to communicate via email or whatnot? And then we figured an application that we could receive notifications by would be the simplest. We also want to make it very simple for both the physician or whomever is requesting the interpretation, because it can also be used by the nurse coordinator or sort of like the secretary, anyone that is organizing the appointments. And the student on the other end would receive a notification. They would also be registered on the application, and they could receive a notification when the language has been requested, and they can accept it, cancel it, or whatnot. And we've thought about a lot of things about, should we provide patient information? Should we not? How can we protect that? How can you protect the privacy of the students and protect the privacy of the physician, whoever is requesting? So the idea would be that within the application, you could make phone calls, you could text, so there would not be need for exchanging of cell phone numbers, for example. And there's many other little ticks that we've thought of. So this would also be how the website would look, and you could see like your different appointments and whether they have been approved by a student, like if a student said that they can be there or not, and who the student is, etc.
So this is what we plan on doing in the nearest future. As mentioned, our first pilot project is ongoing right now through the volunteering CHAP program component of the curriculum. But then from there on, we're hoping to build on the experience and expand the service to the rest of clinics. So based on the feedback that we'll collect from the CHAP pilot project, we'll improve our curriculum and adjust it for the rest of the students who would be interested in interpreting. At the same time as we're seeking funding to launch our app, so the two could be brought together by the upcoming winter, and at which point we would run a second pilot project in the urgent care setting. Specifically, we have a collaboration with the Montreal Children's Hospital emergency room with Dr. Shaheen Hussein and the Jewish General Hospital with Dr. Greenaway, both of which expressed interest in offering their practice as a test service for medical interpretation through our app and with the help of medical students. And then with all the feedback and lessons that we are to learn from this, we would go on to advertise Medcom as a service that could be offered at other sites throughout Montreal. And we would run an informative campaign to explain how to use the app, to explain what are the intricacies of our training, and to convince future users of the quality of our training, and explain what kind of services could be requested. So we mentioned at this stage we're looking for any suggestions on the funding opportunities that could be used by a group like us, and two, any collaboration. So if you think that your service could benefit from medical students interpreting, or if you were interested in participating in one of the pilot projects, as well as any feedback or questions that you might have right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this very interesting project is open for questions. I just remind you to use the mic because we're being live streamed. Any questions, comments? So I wanted to ask, it's great. This is a great initiative. How are you going to do sustainability as medical students? Because when you're going to be in Med 3, it's going to be hard to do.
That is an excellent question. So right now, currently, we are actually an MSS club, which is how we did the recruitment, like to recruit Med 2s. We first started as just Med 3s, and you're absolutely right. I get busier and busier as the year goes on. But that's the idea of sustainability, is that we can recruit new students, train new students. All of these CHAP students will be well informed of Medcom, and hopefully they can become part of the executive team as well.
Other questions or comments? In which case, I'm going to say thank you very much. Congratulations on this very creative and interesting project. So we're going to move on to something completely different, which is career development for faculty members. And we're lucky to have Lisa Munter here, who's going to talk a follow-up. You may remember, those who've been here for a while will know that we had a presentation on Wind for Science in the past, and this is a follow-up presentation. So take it away, Lisa.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the invitation to come back here and to provide you with an update on Wind for Science, which is a women's initiative to support women in the sciences. I'm Lisa Munter. I'm now an associate professor just recently, and an initiative that, thank you. I should mention that more often. And it's an initiative that we started from the pharmacology department. So why support women in the life sciences? I will not elaborate much on the courses and the literature that's out there. I did that last time, but just to say that in an academic career, women drop out after the postdoc stage at a higher rate as compared to males. And there's a lot of research on the causes, the consequences, barriers, and solutions. I just would like to highlight one paper that has been published this year in The Lancet, where actually someone at the CRHI, I'm going to talk about her in a minute, Kara Tannenbaum, evaluated or investigated why women receive less funding through CRHR. They basically compared the project funding towards the foundation program and came to the conclusion that women are less favorable assessed as principal investigators, and it's not due to the possibility that women may propose worse science. So there is a gap. So What is now Win for Science? Win for Science is many arms. We have many activities. It has been many viewers last time I've been here, so I'm happy to say that we did grow over the last year or so. And in the next slides, I'm going to walk you through some of those arms that I displayed here. Part of our program is a seminar series and with which we aim to educate staff, faculty, students, postdocs on the underlying problems about unconscious bias, consequences, barriers, solutions. We always announce our seminars with those Win for Science posters that I put here on the right-hand side. They come in different colors. They are open for everyone in the life sciences, particularly male staff and professors, so we welcome everyone. This year we're going to hear from Angela Campbell about activities at McGill University. We will hear about Michael Hendricks, who also co-authored that Lancet paper that I just talked about. He's a professor in biology. And Ada Sinakor is a professor in the educational and counseling psychology department, if I got that right. And talking about gender bias as one of her professions. So the real advantage of having the seminar series is to educate, and we have a networking wine and cheese session afterwards, and it's really a place where people can put concerns, questions. These are really conversations that we have that you would find nowhere else in the life sciences departments. Another activity that Win for Science had was a forum that we held in May 2018 at the Faculty Club. The goal was to hear from McGill's life science community what is perceived to be the most urgent matters that require action. And we did that in form of roundtable discussions, guided roundtable discussions about barriers and solutions at the level of grad students, postdocs, and professors. We had about 70 participants, and we had note takers at the tables. So all the conversations and discussions were recorded by handwriting. And then we had great support through the SACE office from the Faculty of Medicine, guided through Salim Razak, who's also here in the audience. And one of his helpers, Elizabeth Hillier, who now graduated from McGill University, wrote a report that's for download on either the pharmacology website or my lab's website, basically with the outcome of this forum, with the roundtable discussions. So she identified 4 major points. Number 1 is lack of mentorship. Number 2, there is bias. Many women experience bias. Number 3, recruitment and promotion, that was discussed in different aspects. And number 4, maternity leave and childcare. And we have also some hard numbers. We asked them to tell us in numbers what we can do about it. So I just want to point out 2 questions in the middle. Can we do more to improve the situation for women in life sciences at McGill? 95% said yes. They were more than 40 respondents out of the 70 participants. And the second question was, do you believe that monetary support will help women, for example, with young families? And 97% said yes. So, and we took this as a mission for us to continue our program, and first and foremost, we launched a mentorship program, and I should really mention here that the mentorship program has been designed, organized, and coordinated, not by me, but by, first and foremost, Anne-Sophie Pepin, a PhD student in our department. Would you like to raise your hand quickly, Chet? As well as Maureen McKeek. She's an assistant professor in our department, as well as in chemistry. So for the new school year now, the registration is open. You find the link again on my lab's website, maybe somewhere else on Twitter. I have to look for that. So just to tell you how we did it last year, we had about 56 mentees, 22 female mentors. The goal is to match role models with women, students, postdocs, research assistants. And one of the specialities that we do is that we have group mentorship. So we figure that students or postdocs like to learn from the questions and topics that their peers discuss. So we have usually 2 to 3 mentees and 1 mentor in group discussions. And just to give you an overview, we had most students participating from the human genetics department, then pharmacology, and then the IPN program. And overall, I would like to highlight that what the students appreciated really very much in our mentorship program is that they were paired with mentors from other departments. So I believe that lowered the barrier to talk about issues or a specific problem where they needed advice on how to deal with a certain situation. Another arm of Win for Science is what we call now Win to Lead. And this is really an initiative, an idea that Dr. Masha Praga-Kutursky initiated. So you may raise your hand. So she really initiated meetings of female professors, life science professors at the department. And I wish I would have had those meetings in my first 2 or 3 years here at McGill. They're really very helpful. We talk frankly about issues and details. So sometimes Masha invited guest speakers such as Deborah Titone, who's actually a psychology professor here, and she published on the funding gap at NSERC between female and male PIs. We had Elizabeth Cooper, who's leading the chapter for Women in Bio here in Montreal, and Karen Mossman as an lead example for us, who's Associated Vice Dean and Vice President for Research at the McMaster University. So we talked to her and asked her about her scientific career and her perceptions. Other meetings discuss a certain topics such as funding or supervision and welcoming new female assistant professors. Okay, and what's next is similar to Medcom. We feel somehow limited in the ability to cause change, and we feel that would be different if we would have money to spend on it. So we talked to a couple of people, and we were basically advised that it would be helpful to create a board. So we're working on creating a Win for Science board that will hopefully then help us to really raise funds. And this could be used, for example, to financially support young scientists with children who have to take their children to conference travel and a couple of other ideas. And this is the building this Win for Science board is really first and foremost pushed by Bobby Bidorka, who's a research officer in our department, only until Thursday, I have sadly to say, but I hope that we can keep her as a part of the board. And lastly, I would like to mention that the point number 4 with daycare availabilities at McGill is a reoccurring issue that I've heard from many, many sides. And whenever I raise this issue, there's eye rolling, and McGill is a higher education, not the one for toddler. So we'll see how that goes, but I think there's a lot of literature that it benefits the employer to have daycare close by, and where the employee benefits or is eased out. One of the things that McGill cannot offer right now is daycare spots for new recruits. So assistant professors like to come with small children, and often there is no possibility for McGill to say, hey, don't worry about the daycare spot, you're going to go here. And as part of that, the Student Society of McGill University is, for example, already discussing an expansion, and part of those funds could be used to financially support such a daycare endeavor. But we'll see how that goes. I hope it goes good. If somebody has advice here, I'm happy for any help. So taken together, Win for Science has grown a bit. We have a couple of arms that we follow, and it's really Bobby and I who did the seminar series. Now it's only me and the forum. Bobby will still help with the board. It's Anne-Sophie Pepin and Maureen McKeek who really run the mentorship program, and Masha Praga who does the Win to Lead professor meetings. Thank you.
Well, this is a fantastic initiative, and very much to your credit, Lisa, for taking the leadership on that, as well as everybody else like Bobby and the other people who've been involved. Are there any questions for Professor Munter? Wow, you stunned them into silence. So I guess for me, the key question is, oh, sorry. Oh, I didn't see there. Marianne.
Thank you. That was really great and inspirational effort. Many of the forums that I've attended that are Win for Science like, promoting women in leadership positions and in medicine or life sciences, I sort of get the sense that we're women talking to women, which is extremely important. But I sometimes get the sense that we're preaching to the converted. And one of the things that I've noticed is often missing is the opportunity for education to the other gender or other genders. to be politically correct. Some of the issues around childcare, for example, are not necessarily gender specific as the world is evolving. And a lot of the unmeasured biases that you're talking about, you know, they have to sort of be tackled where they're coming from. And it's not amongst ourselves that we're going to be able to do that, no matter how much we mentor each other. So I'm just saying, just as another circle to add to your wheel, which is
Yeah.
a great, you know, menu of things, is to add that educational component to the other genders.
Yeah, and I know, and it's in part true, but there's actually also very good literature showing that women have the same bias, right? So when a woman compares a male and a female CV, it tends to go, she tends to go for the male one, right? So it's not really the only converted. I mean, I learned a lot about my own biases, right? I was looking how many female and male speakers I invited while I was chairing our seminar series, and at that time I didn't know anything about those gender bias issues, and I didn't took care, and I had like, I don't know, 15% female speakers. I mean, I was embarrassed. So it's overall good to educate, I think. I mean, one has to reflect oneself even more. And with the family care, I agree, it's not only a specific female problem.
Although the literature shows that females are disproportionately burdened with the responsibility for that, not even in you know, modern families. Marjorie.
So I can appreciate the daycare service, but I don't know if your group has connected with AMAUT, because they had surveyed the community. So that could be maybe leveraging once again what MAUT has done.
I'm following Audrey Moore's steps.
Okay. And within the Faculty of Nursing, when we relocated to the new building, I had requested that we create a breastfeeding room. So that has helped faculty and students. So that could be another idea about supporting the family. And there was something else and I forgot. But I will now know you exist.
That's what
and
happens when
follow
you
up.
have 3 little kids, Audrey. You don't remember? Then you get older and it happens anyway. So the other issue is an issue that's very specific to McGill's lack of space, because some of the initiatives that one would want to do, like additional daycare slots, are even if suddenly you could get the resources in terms of people and money and so on, it isn't obvious to me where you would put additional daycare space. And this is a big challenge facing this university in many, essentially every meeting I go to is about, there's a problem with space, but it's a very good concrete example of how something as practical as having additional space would make a difference for people. The same problems, as far as I know, exist also for those people who are based in the hospitals, where there again aren't, you know, when they built the new MUHC building, for example, there's no space for daycare, there's no space for a gym, there's no space for any of those kind of things which are considered to be frivolous. It's interesting that the capitalist captains of industry always include those things in their plans when they build things, but somehow our socialistic healthcare system couldn't see its way to it. Anyway, thank you very much, Lisa. That was really excellent. Keep up the great work. So I think we're going to go on, and next the dean, me, is going to talk about Project Renaissance. I keep talking about this, hoping that if I talk about it enough, it'll come to an end. It will come to an end in 2022, but I'm talking about this because we're getting closer and closer to finalizing the last stage of this strategic planning process. So for people who are new, we've been working on a strategic planning process to cover the period from 2016 to 2022. And the goal of this is to look at all different kinds of aspects, education, research, health affairs, academic affairs, but also the structure of the faculty. And as you will know from the launch of the bicentennial next year, that the Faculty of Medicine is 200 years old. It's not a medical school anymore. It, of course, has a great medical school, but it's not only a medical school. Interestingly, even though people, at least those of us who went here as a medical school, conflate, for us, the Faculty of Medicine and the School of Medicine are the same thing, we heard from people in medical education that they didn't have a home where they could discuss their issues. And so this was a driver to rethink the structure of the faculty. We also have the biomedical sciences departments, which have 1,800 students, and it's sort of, they're there. We're sitting inside the Department of Physiology today in this room, but where does the Department of Physiology live? Does it live in the medical school? Does it live in the Faculty of Medicine? Is it in the Faculty of Science? Where is it? So after a lot of discussions, and I've presented this before, so I'll be very brief, we've come up with a goal of a sort of matrix where operations that cut across the whole faculty would be like the horizontal parts of the matrix, led by vice deans, and the specific academic programs are vertical, generally led by associate deans. And so this is what I mean by horizontal. You can see at the top, I've called it FMHS for Faculty of Medicine Health Sciences. I'm going to get to that in a second. But there's the administration, education, research, academic affairs, and health affairs. And then on the bottom, you can see a whole bunch of vertical programs: medicine, biomedical sciences, School of Population Global Health, Ingram School of Nursing, School of Physical and Occupational Therapy, and School of Communication Sciences and Disorders. And the idea, at least in principle, is that these things like education and research and so on cross all of the disciplines and are not specific to any one school. And by doing it this way, we get more higher quality support, we hope, for the different individual programs than they would have if they were isolated. In terms of the educational program, so we already have a School of Nursing, we already have a School of Physical and Occupational Therapy, and the School of Communication Sciences and Speech-Language Pathology. The School of Nursing is going to be 100 years old next year, right, 2020, so it's not from yesterday. We have a brand new School of Population Global Health, and actually the head of the school is sitting right there, Tim Evans, who's new. You can wave your hand, Tim, just say that's what he looks like. We assume that there's going to be a School of Medicine within the faculty. And the question is, what I've been working on this summer is really the School of Biomedical Sciences. So some of you have been in meetings already, in fact in this room and others, where I've actually been meeting with all the biomedical science departments, so that would be like physiology, pharmacology, biochemistry, human genetics, and so on, to make sure I understand the issues for each of those departments. And once that consultation is finished, we're going to move forward with a formal proposal, or we hope to move forward with a formal proposal of creating these different schools. If somebody's going to ask me what's the current vote on the School of Biomedical Science, it varies by department. So physiology was the most enthusiastic. Biochemistry was the most stunned. There's certain variation. There's a general, the reason I'm putting it forward is really because I think it's very important that there be a structure and a champion for this kind of academic activity within our faculty. It's been made very clear to me by a number of people in this room that if we do have such a champion, that person would have to be somebody of high stature, somebody that all the members of that school would respect and want to follow. And I agree with that. But also, I think this gives an opportunity to make sure that there are somebody or a group of somebodies who take responsibility for all these departments and, more importantly, for their educational programs and for their research infrastructure. So, but I need your help. So one of the parts of this structural change is to change the name of the faculty. So when I first, even before I became dean, there was discussions, and some people in the room will remember, of changing the name of the faculty on the basis that it's not really a faculty of medicine only. I just said nursing is going to be 100 years old, so this is not exactly a new idea that there's more than medicine here. And a number of different names have been put forward. This name seems to be the one that has some support and the least resistance. So I'm asking for a motion. So I could use my imperial powers and just put this through Senate and the board and rubber stamp it. And it's been presented in this assembly before, so it's not completely new. But I feel that because it's a really an identity issue, and we're coming up on our 200th anniversary. It would be important to make sure that we've done proper consultation. So I'm asking for a motion to allow us to do a poll. Now, today I got asked at Deanery Executive, why do you need a poll? You can just do this. And the answer was that if everybody likes it, that's fine. If everybody doesn't care, there won't be anybody filling out the poll, which is what usually happens. That's fine too. But if there's a group of people who really hate it, they'll fill out the poll and we'll know about it. And so it's more really to be sure that we're not doing something that for which there's a lot of resistance. Because if there were, I would want to find out more about it and consult. But it's a bit tedious to be consulting so much. But some of you will know the story of a certain dean of medicine in Alberta who is long gone, who decided to change the structure of his faculty within the first few weeks he got there. He doesn't live in this country anymore. So I'm asking, this is all true. He did worse things than that. But anyway, I'm not that guy. If anything, I'll over-consult. I want a motion from somebody to move forward with a sensitization communication, which means a communication that explains the context and what we want to do, and a poll of all members of the faculty that includes academics, students, and admin staff. Anybody willing to? Dr. Stearns, do I have a secondary? I have Dr. Tsimikalis, and so I'm going to call a vote. Is there any questions or comments about that before? Yes, Dr. Gagnon. Just wait for your mic, please. Merci.
Thank you very much, Dave. My only question, would the dean of that McGill Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences, in theory, would be in theory the same as medical school or two different people, or it could be nursing or whoever, healthcare professional?
So we don't know the answer in the long run. So this is an excellent question, and it's actually something I should have said in my presentation. So for now, I have about 2.5 years in my mandate, and so for now, what we would propose is I would do both jobs, which is what I'm doing now. I think when my successor is being named, that's going to be a key question. Do you have one person do those jobs, or do you split the jobs into two? If you split into two, how do you decide which things go with which? I think it's actually a hard question. We thought about it a lot. There are technical issues about what kind of person can be the dean of something. Part of it is a limitation in this university. There are universities that have executive deans and regular deans. So they'll have a faculty like this, and they'll have an executive dean and it's usually a vice president or vice provost. And then they'll have a dean of medicine underneath that person, and a dean of nursing underneath that person, and a dean of public health underneath that person. So each of the schools actually has a dean, not an associate dean or a vice dean. I only work here. This is how our university is organized. It might change, and we might decide to change it. In our university, there are only faculty deans, and then everybody else is either an associate dean or a vice dean. So we've tried to differentiate those two jobs by saying the vice deans are horizontal and operational, and the associate deans are vertical and oriented towards certain programs. It's not perfect, but it gives you an idea of how it works. What do I think we should do? I think in the long run, you'll probably have to split the jobs. But what you call the people and how it would work, I don't know. I think there's work to be done on that. Dr. Robert.
Thank you. I think the no problem with the name in terms of the health science. There's a question, though. You raised the issue of PNOT and nursing. Mm-hmm. They're not there. So are they medicine or are they health sciences? And in fact, if you're trying to solve the problem of nursing, you're not solving it because they're not really a health science.
So there are faculties of health sciences with nursing in them. We wouldn't be the only ones. And in fact, there is no name that satisfies everybody, okay? We've looked actually at names all over the place. There's even in some, I think it was in Scotland, they have schools like the Faculty of Nursing, Agriculture, and something else. Like the faculty is just whatever schools are in there. They and they can have like 10 names. This was a compromise because what the idea behind it is, it says we're not just a faculty of medicine. we're 200 years old, so it doesn't throw out the medicine. Health sciences, like at McMaster and other places, does include other health professions, including nursing in some, I don't remember from McMaster, but in many places it does. And this is the compromise that we're proposing. Accepting that, like all compromises, it is imperfect, and some people will not be satisfied. And now I'm going to hear from Arjorie why it's a bad idea.
No. I'm not saying at all if it's a bad idea, because what you're going to do is you're going to poll nursing, and nursing's going to let you know if
Correct.
it's a bad idea, because that they'll do.
I'm sure.
But I think in my response initially when you were trying to get a sense, I had suggested, is there a way that collectively as a community we can come together and create a logo that would nicely visualize
idea.
McGill Faculty in Medicine, Health Sciences, so that you have some kind of icon that then has some visual depictions of all the different schools that we collectively represent.
So I'm looking down there at the communication people, getting the business. In fact, Diana wants to speak, right? Do you want to?
No, I'm just so she knows who the communication people are.
Okay, so I think Arjorie, that's an excellent point. So you'll often see there's a Faculty of Medicine seal or logo, and it's really about the medical school. That it's part of the history of the medical school, and sometimes it's put up for the faculty. And while it says Facultatis McGilliensis or whatever, it is not really speaking to the whole faculty. So I think that's an excellent point, that in our branding, if you want to use that term, we can go some ways towards improving that, and I think that's an excellent suggestion. Are there any other comments? Yes, Rami.
Yes, so as is with any poll, the need for education about the topic is essential, and I see that students will be polled. So I'm wondering, in the sensitization communication, what will be said or explained? That way, an idea that's founded on some opinion that's relevant can be made.
Well, luckily you're sitting about about a meter and a half away from the communication director, who will undoubtedly help us craft an excellent communication. I think, though, you made a very good point, which is the communication we send to students will not necessarily be identical to the communication we're going to send to faculty members. And we might want to tune our message so to put in context for students. I think for students, I'll be blunt, most students are not going to be like certain people like me here from 1972 on. I've been here for a while. A lot of students will finish here and will go on and have a life. But whereas the faculty members mostly are going to be here for a long time. So frankly, I most want to hear from faculty members who have to live with whatever we do. But we do want to hear from students and learners if they have opinions. And so we will have to try and craft a message that will grab them enough to make them interested in replying. But you can understand that we're especially interested in administrative staff or academic staff who will come here to work every day, and what it says on the sign reflects them. And I think Arjorie's point about this symbolic, having logos or other branding that really sends the message of who we are, I think is quite important. It's an important issue where you work. And I think I saw Rebecca, lots of hands now. I think Dr. Funnell is next.
I'm just wondering if this poll is going to have room for comments.
Sure. You're free to make a comment now if you like.
Well, I would be
You have to talk into the mic.
I would be echoing Bernard's comment, I think.
Okay, so thank you. There are some other hands over there. I don't know. Oh, Rebecca, there you are. Okay. Sorry, excuse me. I saw somebody behind you too.
Thank you, David, for that. How will you decide? Will you decide in advance what the response rate and what will you consider endorsement or complaint? Is it like negatives are always louder than positives?
If we don't hear like for instance, if I get 35 nurses who all complain, then I have a problem, okay? If I get one nurse, one medical student, and one member of my team who complain, then I have an interesting comment. I think we're going to have to make a judgment, look, this is not a real plebiscite or a referendum. It's really to make sure that we're not missing something important. I mean, already we've heard some interesting ideas, and we're really in listening mode. Because of the technical issues about getting the School of Medicine finished and the School of Biomedical Sciences, or whatever it's going to be, finished, we're not going to be submitting this to Senate until the spring. We originally hoped for by Christmas, but it'll be in the spring. So we have time to get some feedback. If there really is an issue, we'll deal with it. If we can't reach a consensus, we'll continue with our old name. There was a comment over there.
Hi. As a student that's new to the faculty council and also a student that's signing on to be here for basically ever because I just started my PhD.
Great. Another lifer.
Is there going to be room in this poll that will actually ask for opinions as to what we as students...
That's what Dr. Funnell asked, and
Okay.
I think we have to leave you some space so that you can give comments.
Cool.
But you are free to make a comment now if you would like, before you lose the mic.
I mean, what I'm thinking is that it would be more interesting to name this something along the lines of the Faculty of Healthcare Providers, Researchers, and Education, or Sciences, something along the lines of...
So, okay, but that's quite a mouthful, and it has the problem of transmitting easily the identity. It doesn't have the branding oomph, but if 500 people write me and say that's what they want, we will certainly consider it. I think Dr. Morelli has her hand up.
Yeah, I realize how difficult it is, and I'm sure you've given this a lot of thought, and you don't want to have something that's too long. But have you just considered playing around with the order of the words? The Faculty of Health, Medicine, and Science? Because health today is so much more than medicine and science, right? So, and we think of nurses as clinicians. They're also clinicians. They're part of medicine, and science is a little bit different from
So I don't think.
clinicians. So I'm just
So
saying.
I hear you, and I look forward to your comments, but I don't think we can call it specifically that, because there is a Faculty of Science. So we cannot call it the something and science. I mean, we have to have our own name. This name was kind of chosen in part because there are places that have names like this, but also in this university, the Faculty of Agriculture became the Faculty of Agriculture and Environmental Science. That didn't encompass everything that happens at that faculty, but it gave a bit broader definition and showed that it was more than just agriculture. But I'm listening, so it could be Faculty of Health was considered. The trouble with Faculty of Health is almost all of our work is aimed at disease. That's one problem. And health goes way beyond. Remember that covers everything from nutrition and so on, which is not in our faculty.
Right. Well, I'm just saying I understand that there's a time constraint, but there's an opportunity here, with 200 years, et cetera, to really do something, to choose something that's really forward-thinking and maybe sort of trailblazing somehow. I don't know
Right.
what that is, and
Okay,
I'm sure
well-
you've thought about it, but it's just
Well,
kind of a comment of.
I'll be honest. Part of my goal was to be trailblazing at the same time as we weren't forgetting our history. It seemed like changing our name completely after 200 years to something completely different, so no one even remembers that there was a Faculty of Medicine, seemed a bit on the edge for me. And so that was also part of the thinking here. If we're not throwing out the idea it's Faculty of Medicine, but we're being more inclusive by saying health sciences, because the strongest alternative to this was Faculty of Health Sciences, which is used in a number of places and is considered to be encompassing. Okay, whether it's, Bernard's point is well taken. It's not perfect. It doesn't really describe. And yes, you could have a Faculty of Medicine, Nursing, P&OT at School of Voice Communication, and list all the schools, but that's, at a certain point it becomes cumbersome. And so that's where we're coming from. I'm not saying we're right, but you should understand our rationale. Okay, and Diana, and then this gentleman over here.
I'll just add a point regarding the notion of branding. When you have a name like any name, be it, Faculty of Medicine, McGill, etc., you have to be careful because it has, it's known out there as the brand, and if you erase that, you can you lose your identity to a large number of alumni, prospective donors, etc. So in branding, they always say don't flush the equity that you have built with your brand. So you have to be careful with that too. It's just another notion.
Professor Barrington Lee has a comment.
Thanks. Two comments. One on the process. Polls may be analogous to this that I think work well include options and rationale. So you're not going to get 30 or 50 people suggesting the same alternative name, which you gave as maybe as a possibility. But if you're to give choices and if you actually give the pros and cons, that's going to help a lot. And another comment, just on the term health sciences, which I just looked up on Wikipedia, it does tend to connote only the STEM disciplines, and there's now, so I think there would be a lot of people doing social science who would not ever feel quite at home in that umbrella. Maybe FAES is an analog where that's small enough that it's not a big deal. But.
Okay. So what if I understood correctly, you're suggesting that we do a poll with choices in it. If we do that, we'd have to be, the goal here is really to detect whether there's a problem. Okay, I'm being transparent. If we go to actually ask for choices, then we would have to find a way to make sure that we had a sufficiently large sample of the population to be sure that the choice, because all that happens, you can have like there's a certain political party in Canada where one community got together and got their candidate elected as the leader. I'm just nervous about
Not necessarily suggesting a vote. In fact, you could just explain the alternatives that you'd gone through and why they were rejected, and still vote up or down.
Okay, so what you're saying is the sensitization part, as we've called it here, needs to be explicit about the rationale for this choice, including why we didn't choose Faculty of Health, Faculty of Health Sciences, or Faculty of 27 things.
Right. That informs people's opinion.
Okay, we're going to bring this to a close. I think Dr. Gagnon has a final word.
Very quick question, sorry. There's some individual that will have no problem to be the dean of both, but if you get into a like south of the border type of tyrannic type of leader, is there a check and balance that would be built into that new structure?
So, well, the main check and balance, so it's an excellent point. The main check and balance is that whoever has this job, which I have now, you have two bosses, okay? You have both the provost and the principal. And so while anything is possible in this world, as we've learned, it's difficult for anybody to get into one of these jobs and work in a completely chaotic, unfettered way. Can I guarantee it would never happen? No, but there is a significant amount of checks and balances. This job is quite analogous, unlike the name, which there's lots of names, you will see in North America at least, but also in some other countries I've seen, an increasing model where the equivalent of this faculty, whatever its name, has a leader who is both a dean and a vice principal or vice president or vice provost, something, they'll have a name like that, and they have pretty much the same job. In fact, I met a person from China who had exactly the same title and the same job with the same schools in Wuhan. So, which we never had any interaction with that school. But the reason why it's so similar is because the responsibilities are similar across different places. The time where you don't see that is where nursing and public health, let's say, are separate faculties. Then you don't see it. Then you'll have a faculty of medicine or medicine and dentistry. It'll be more circumscribed. Those tend to be in universities that are bigger, where the other schools have critical mass. That doesn't mean that in the future, for example, that nursing or population global health couldn't become faculties. But the current administration has decided for now that we will only have this many faculties. So we have to deal with what we have now. I think that's enough talking about that. Boy, that was great. That's the most discussion we've had in a while. So that was great. Good way to start off the year. The proposal has been, it's been proposed and seconded. So I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor, lift your little cards. Okay, any against? Any abstentions? None. Okay, so the motion passes, and we're going to move on. So, I usually, every spring, give a State of the Union address about the Faculty of Medicine, but I didn't get to do it that last year, so I get to do it now. And this is all about money, and it's called Where Does It All Go? So the goal of this presentation is to give you guys a broad outline. Some of you have seen these slides before in the last version, but not everybody, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself. But I want to make sure people understand where revenues and expenditures, how they work in the faculty, how we decide on what we're going to spend money on, what do we mean by soft funds, how does the Ministry of Education use their funds in the hospitals, I hope I'll get to that, and the budget for the coming year, which is a bit of a problem. So first, these are frequently asked questions. Where does the dean get all of his money? Where does the dean spend all of his money? Which, of course, none of it is my money. Who decides how the money is spent? And how does you were asking before, Robert, about the evil, tyrannical, chaotic leader. How does that evil, tyrannical, chaotic leader make decisions? So just to remind you, we have hard money, soft money, and flow-through money. So hard money is money that is coming directly to the university. People will know it as the 1A budget, those of you who have anything to do with budgets. And the 1A budget is essentially generated by the number, by students enrolling in different programs in the university and getting a grant from the government of Quebec for enrollment. We do not, for Canadian and Quebec students, the money that is paid in tuition goes to Quebec City and we get a grant back. For people now who are in so-called deregulated programs, those people are no longer supported by the government of Quebec and they pay tuition which stays in the university, and the university is responsible for all services for those individuals. So those are the two main groups but that's all 1A budget, hard money. The other budget is the capital budget. And those of you who have walked around lower campus of this university will have noticed that there's quite a lot of construction going on. And in fact, we have a lot of capital budget being spent on renovating the university. None of it is available to pay professor salaries, student services, or any of the other things that we use the 1A money. So the capital budget is for buildings and maintenance, and the operating budget, the 1A budget, is for basically running the place. And you can have a deficit in one and a surplus in the other, and you can't mix and match. This is just the way it works. We've been doing well in the capital budget because the government of Quebec has recognized that we have what's called a large deferred maintenance. And really, I have to say, in the last couple of years, for the first time, it's been recognized, which is why they have all this money to dig up the lawn and block all the traffic and all that stuff. Now we have soft money, and those are endowments, charitable donations, the Middle East money. And then there's some money from contracts, overhead, and other business. And then we have flow-through. So those of you who have research grants, they are credited to the Faculty of Medicine or whatever faculty the grant is held in, and then it is reserved only to be used for that research. It's not available for general use. And the same thing, there is money that comes from the Ministry of Education that is intended to cover residency and medical student education in the hospitals. That goes to the Faculty of Medicine. We have to turn it over to the hospitals. They give us an accounting of how the money is used, but we aren't free to use that money any way we want. So I think I already mentioned this. The use of the 1A budget, the hard money, is governed by something called the agreement, with a capital A. So the agreement is a document. It actually exists, and it is constructed in partnership between the Provost's office and our finance department and our academic affairs department, who work on things like how many students do we have enrolled, how many professors do we have on the books, how much money are we spending on administrative staff, all that kind of stuff is all put into a document, which is an agreement. There has been a thing called enrollment-driven revenues, which is the more students you have, the more revenue you get. I was informed last week by the provost that this no longer will exist and instead will be turned into some sort of permanent budget that will go into the thing. I'm sure we'll do much better that way. I was assured that nobody will lose money, but anyway. Bottom line is, every year there's a formal process by which we negotiate with the provost's office on how much budget we're going to get. That includes asking for new resources, reassigning money that's on the table, and so on. And the main players in that are Dimitra Kafantaris and Bachi Megzwend, who are doing the finance side, and Leslie Fellows and her team, who are doing the academic affairs, the number of professors. So I already went through this. There you go. Okay. So how do we decide what to put in the agreement or build our requests? So we do to talk to the chairs and directors of, about professorial and administrative staff. We try to integrate programs as they're approved by the Provost's office. So for example, if someone proposes a new graduate program and it's approved, it has to be integrated into our budget agreement. We make new requests for new academic programs, and sometimes we make requests to correct budgetary anomalies because things change. So an example, you will recall that we had problems with accreditation for the medical school, for example, and that required an investment of resources, things we weren't investing in, and we were able to negotiate that to a certain degree. We had problems with the animal center upstairs here in the McIntyre building, and we got some injection of funds last year to help cover increased costs there. And we work, although in principle this is a once-a-year event, we try and work on a continuous basis with our colleagues in the Provost's office. So the Provost has all the money that comes in from all the different faculties and programs in the university into a giant pot. And that pot is then tries to figure out balancing revenue and expenses. And we don't have in this university a zero-based budgeting model. In many universities, what happens is you eat what you kill, I think is the expression. So if you have a certain number of professors, you have to have enough students to pay for those professors. In this university, for better or for worse, that's not how it works. So there are programs in this university that generate way more money than they spend, and there are other programs that spend more than they generate. And the provost uses the money to cross-subsidize. So for example, I mean, just to use an example, nothing to do with our faculty, the Faculty of Law, which is very highly ranked and is a world-class Faculty of Law, is quite small and couldn't sustain itself on the number of students it has. Same thing with the Faculty of Music. Nevertheless, I think we would agree it's very much to the university's benefit to have world-class music and law, but there's no chance of them ever generating enough revenue in our system to pay for that. On the other hand, in faculties like arts and science, especially, they have so many students and their costs are capped, so they generate more revenue than they need to spend. And that generates money that can be redistributed. Our faculty traditionally has actually generated more revenue than we brought in, but not anymore. So the provost's job is to try and align the resources with the strategic revision of the university and respect the priorities. So the university needs to grow revenues always, needs new sources of revenue generation. The current plan is to reduce the rate of tenure track recruitment, and because we were starting to reach the limit. The provost is looking at, they're looking for increased revenue from international activities, and the provost sees opportunities to generate revenue from international activities that we do. We're not sure how much these rates that you see on the slide will apply, but we're a little nervous about them. A key thing for this faculty, however, is that we've increased our number of administrative staff enormously. So in 2015, we were about 650 administrative staff. In 2019, we're about 850. So that's a lot, okay? Now, some of those staff were hired for very specific reasons. I would say most of the people who are hired are absolutely necessary. So don't get the idea that suddenly people are going to be getting pink slips in the mail or something. That's not happening. I mention it because we do have to look carefully at the staff. So what are some of the reasons why our staff increased? Well, some of it was accreditation. It's absolutely necessary. Some of it was meeting the needs of our postgraduate medical programs, which were in the hospitals. Some of it had to do with the project Campus Outaouais, which is in Gatineau, Quebec, where it's a whole new project, so that's new stuff. Some of it may need to be reevaluated. So this year we did get some things. So we got money for the electron microscopy facility, the M&I radiochemistry lab. We got some stuff for MDCM admissions. They allowed us to cover our deficit, and so on. But we also asked for things related to accreditation, budget cuts, the Ingram School of Nursing, and so on, and they were rejected. So I don't want to get into the details, but just to show you, we asked for some things are accepted, some things are not. I think the provost now wants to move away from these asks and wants to work on a more ongoing basis. So then what is soft money? Otherwise known as the Dean's Discretionary Fund. You know, the Dean's Discretionary Fund. In my first year, I was told, oh, you've spent $10 million of your Dean's Discretionary Fund, and I hadn't realized I even had a Dean's Discretionary Fund. So what is this? So this is money that is not regulated by the government of Quebec. It's not 1A budget, and in principle can be used more flexibly. In practice, it's mostly not discretionary, even though it's called discretionary. It has very specific uses. We've been living off this money for the last number of years because it's the difference between what we get from the provost and what it costs to run the place. So the first kind is endowment funds. We're very fortunate to have about $460 million in endowment funds that generates about $19 million in revenue every year. That's very important. But of course, this is mainly designated. People give money for an endowment. They don't say, here's an endowment, the dean can do whatever she wants. It usually says, here's an endowment to support this, the nursing school, the chair of something or other, and so on. And so even though we have that money, and it's very helpful, it can't be moved from one thing to another. So it doesn't always help us solve problems. Currently, when we do fundraising, and this week there'll be a launch of a new campaign for the university, currently donors tend not to like to give money for endowments in general. Interest rates are low, and they want to see something happen in short term, and so they give money to be spent. And so the ability to grow our endowment is going to be limited. We get charitable donations every year. They vary a lot. Again, they're usually designated, and even when they're undesignated, they usually come with restrictions. So we get someone gives a donation of $100,000 for medical research. We can't use that to hire somebody for the well office or hire a new teacher, buy new equipment for teaching in the physiology department. There is some undesignated funds which goes to the Dean's Discretionary Fund, but most of it ends up in donation funds, even when it's undesignated. So it'll belong to physiology or to medicine or whatever. Now, I mentioned the campaign. We have a modest goal for this faculty of $700 million. I expect everybody to contribute. So we've raised quite a bit of that. I mean, we've raised about 35% to 40%. Where's Chantal? She was here. 35? 35% has already been raised. $200 million out of that is for the M&I, M&H campaign, and the rest is Faculty of Medicine. There's a new executive director for health affairs for advancement named Brian Thompson, who's been named, and he has responsibility for all of the health disciplines. And it's going to be very important that every department and every leader play a role in this. Now, I want to talk about Middle East money, which has historically, or in recent years, been the secret sauce that we've used to survive. And we were getting almost $20 million a year from this source. Some of you may have read about Chrystia Freeland and her tweets, and MBS and his response. So the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has now canceled their program with Canada, not just with McGill, and is gradually stopping to send students to Canada. And we're looking at a significant decline in the number of foreign medical graduates who do their residency here starting next year. And as this decline hits, it comes with a very significant number of significant consequences. First of all, for the ones who are residents, it means they won't be available to look after patients. Second of all, it means for those who are in different educational programs, it puts some of those programs at risk if they were really dependent on those students. And for everybody in this room, And on TV, it means that our finances are at risk. And so we're looking at a marked decrease in our finances. I'm going to skip over this, although I went to ask questions. This is the most important slide. So our total operating budget is about $125 million. And in fiscal year 19, we broke even. We had a $500 surplus. Obviously, it's just a little joke. 95% of our budget is salaries, right? So if we have to reduce our budget, there's only salaries. And, during the year, we do have various things that help us with our financial situation, but we're looking at a very substantial deficit for 2020, $5.6 million that we won't have any money to cover. Now, people who are in leadership positions are going to be informed. There's going to be a budgetary exercise to reduce spending in the faculty that will affect everyone. First and foremost, the dean's office, but not just the dean's office. Everybody will be asked to do something. We're not going to be able to make this deficit go away in 1 year. It's going to take time, and we are working very hard to try and replace the Middle East money that was being generated by Saudi students with other students to try and at least compensate partially. But I think the faculty needs to be aware that we're facing a difficult situation. This will be the same for any faculty in Canada that had significant numbers of Saudi residents, not just us, Toronto, Ottawa, Dalhousie, and so on, all are in a similar situation. We're probably more at risk. One question is, how do we decide what to do with the money we have, or how to deal with the deficit? So there's a committee called the DOC, the Dean's Operations Committee, which I chair, which has all the vice deans, the executive director. It also has the director of communications. And we try and rule by consensus, which means that if everybody tells me I'm wrong, I usually listen. In principle, I have to decide everything. I have to sign everything. But we really try, and as you can tell from my over-consultation on the last thing, we try and be very consultative and not arbitrary, and try and be transparent. Of course, there's also a Deanery Executive Committee, which is the executive committee of this body, which includes the associate deans as well as some of the administration directors. And they're mainly spending their time on policy issues. And then, of course, there's the Faculty Council, which has to look at final approval of policies and strategic directions, which is why we spent so much time discussing a name today. So in summary, income here is driven by enrollment, endowments, and international students. Hard money, I didn't say this, but I'm going to say it now, is prioritized for professorial salaries and key educational programs. We need to diversify our soft money. We were so dependent on, we were kind of addicted to easy money from the Middle East, and that's on us. We have to do better. We are fortunate to have excellent administrative and academic affairs teams, and I can tell you, because of them, our negotiations with the provost go much better than they would otherwise. And as I said, we're going to have to do something about our budget because of the projected budget deficit. So with that, I'm going to stop and ask for questions or comments. So I can see the thrill in everybody's eyes when I mention deficits, and Dr. Robert is first.
I'd like to thank you. Thank you for a very clear presentation, very helpful. One of the first points you mentioned was the deregulation of tuition, and I don't think most people know what programs that affects and to what extent, if any, that affects our faculty. Could you clarify that?
So I'm not an expert on it. My understanding is that international students are now essentially, for all intents, even undergrad, are essentially deregulated. But it goes by program, not by student. Right. So
I guess I had a specific question.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me. I thought you wanted
specifically with respect to the MSc non-thesis.
So again, this is by program. So
right.
There are programs in general. Professional master's programs are expected to become deregulated. So what is a professional master's program? That's a very good question. I don't know. Thesis-based master's programs are not deregulated. They're not deregulated. And so I don't know how that, but the tuition that we get from international students stays in the university, but the government doesn't give us any revenue for those students.
Does it come back to our faculty is a question?
Well, I went through the budgetary process. There's no question that departments which have significantly increased the numbers of students have ended up with more faculty members. They've been able to recruit. Because the main currency in the 1A budget is positions. Okay, so family medicine, I see Jillian sitting here, family medicine was able to greatly increase its number of graduate students as an example, and they were able to hire quite a number of professors, and we were able to rent space for them and do all kinds of other things. There is no question that we expect, for instance, the new School of Population and Global Health to significantly increase the number of graduate students it covers, because we need to become, we have an outstanding programs, let's say in EPI or biostats and so on, but they're relatively small compared to what we should be able to do. And we don't have a significant number of professional masters. A lot of schools of public health, for example, will have programs that are really oriented, they're not oriented towards research, they're oriented towards preparing people for a more practical approach. And I think there are examples in many different parts of the faculty where that's possible. I'm just picking on that because I see Tim in front of me, but I think that's true for nursing. I think that's true for continuing professional development, and for other parts of the Faculty of Medicine. Can I guarantee that every dollar we raise will come back to the faculty? No, I can't. But I do know that our best result, our best chance of improving our funding situation is to be as successful as possible in increasing our numbers. And I will say one last thing before Ariane speaks, which is at last week's meeting of the deans, it was stated that the university has decided that it has reached how many, the number of undergraduate students it wants. It does not want to expand the undergraduate programs anymore. Its emphasis on growth will be in graduate programs, which is, I think, for our faculty, that's very advantageous. Dr. Morelli.
Thank you, David. That was really clear and really helpful. As we lose the Saudi contingency of money, I wonder, I'm sure you've thought of this, but are we exploring other places like China? China, for example, just to give you an example that I'm familiar with, at Harvard is actually setting up campuses. They're setting up Harvard campuses in China and negotiating directly with the university at a really good cost and paying money. If I don't get, without exaggerating, 3 or 4 emails a month from students or physicians in Chinese universities who want to come and have money to do observerships, which I cannot absorb, and I don't even know where to send these people. So there should be an area of capture for all these emails that many of us get, so that there's like a central, and so we could build some educational programs around that we can then actually make money from.
So I have witnesses in the room who can tell you that I've given that very same speech, so I totally agree with you. We right now have one person, Diana Sarai, who is who's been given the responsibility of handling all of this. We've hired Howard Bergman, as you may know, as an assistant dean for international to create an international office. One of the problems is the provost has not yet restaffed the central office of the university, and so there's exactly one person in the university in the international office of the university. So needless to say, we are way, way, way behind. Provost is committed to correcting that, so we'll have to see what he does. I can say that for our faculty, we are exploring those things. Dr. Bergman in particular is very active in China, but so is the group from the MNI. Our capacity to do, we don't have the same scope of action as a place like Harvard, which is a private university with a very large endowment, so it can accept risks that are a little harder for us to accept. But we are nevertheless exploring things, and in particular, we're looking for partners on the ground in different parts of the world where we can do things. So I'm leading a delegation that's going, for example, to the UAE and Kuwait in November with representatives from our faculty, from dentistry, from graduate studies, from education. We're all going there en masse to look for opportunities in that part of the world. There are other groups. We will be looking at other locations, including China, other areas of Southeast Asia, and we even have had one program in South America.
It's just right now is a really good time because there's a void, there's a vacuum. The United States is not a friendly place. There's a huge interest in Canadian
You do know that we are
universities.
having some difficulties with China, right?
No.
The same gang that gave us the Saudi Arabia problem have also helped us with China.
I'm just saying. I think
Understood.
you understand.
Let's see if I have other comments. If not, okay, I hope I've answered your questions. So we've come to, thank you for your attention. We've come to the business part of the meeting. So I'm actually going to go through this relatively quickly just to tell you that there was a steering committee meeting on August 28th, which approved the minutes, which are online. We welcome new members. We identified vacancies which are discussed on slide 65, okay, and approved today's agenda. So we'll leave it to you to look at the minutes. Vacancies. So we need, family medicine needs to give us a representative for non-tenure track faculty members, both for faculty council. We need a representative from the Faculty Leadership Commons. Have we heard, Leah, has anyone volunteered? So I will volunteer somebody. And research associates. For the steering committee, we would like to have a graduate student or postdoctoral student on that, as well as a representative from non-tenure track faculty members. And the nominating committee is looking for members. So if anyone's interested in participating or being involved, please let us know. Let Leah know, she's in the front here. I want to just let you know that we've updated our faculty code of conduct. This is not the most interesting part of the presentation, but it is very important because, of course, the code of conduct is a document that we use to really judge if there's a problem in someone's behavior or the way things are done. We look back to the code of conduct. A key change in the code of conduct, first of all, we have to talk about our values, which include integrity, honesty, fairness, and the respects of the rights of others. And this applies whether you're a learner, an administrator, or a professor, clinician, whatever. And this is a key change in our code of conduct because the goal of the new code is to make sure that everyone is covered by it. It's not just a code of conduct for medical students or a code of conduct for professors in nursing. It's a code of conduct for everybody. And it's a framework to understand what it's meant by the shared responsibility for appropriate and professional behavior. So I'm going to skip ahead. I just want to say what is different from what we had before. So first of all, everybody is covered by it. Whether you're talking about on campus or in a clinical affiliate, whether you're talking about people in a basic science department or in a clinical school, everybody is covered by this. It's more robust and more rigorous, and it's linked to all the policies and procedures in the university. And in particular, we try to align things with the university's policies and procedures. So this is not a code of conduct instead of, it's a code of conduct which brings together those policies and procedures. Every member of the faculty is responsible to have read this and know how it applies to them, which is easy to say and hard to do, but it is true nonetheless. So there's a number of policies that are covered by this that already exist at the university. For instance, the policy on harassment and discrimination prohibited by law, the policy against sexual violence, the policy on conflict of interest, the policy on conduct and research, policy on student conduct and disciplinary procedures. All of these are contained within the code of conduct of the faculty. We're not replacing any of them. A few key takeaways. You will have received, if you're a member of the Faculty Council, Appendix 1, which talks about the standards of professional conduct, And the key ones are honesty, respect for others, confidentiality, and responsibility. And Appendix 2, which talks about what to do if something goes wrong. And finally, there are different go-to resources if something goes wrong depending where you work. Health professions are the well office. In grad or postdoctoral studies, it's a program director or an associate dean. For academics, it's either your director, your chair, or the academic affairs office. That's the vice dean academic affairs, Dr. Fellows. And if you're in admin staff, it's human resources. So this is being rolled out. We've now, the leadership knows, faculty council. We're going to be sending out a faculty-wide message. We're going to be expanding our website, making it part of our electronic news, and putting it on the screens that are around campus. So why are we doing this? Well, first of all, accreditation. We need to have this for accreditation of a variety of different programs. But more importantly, we really think that it's important to define ourselves as creating an environment where everybody behaves professionally, where people who are learners see this model properly by our faculty members and by our administrative staff. And with that, I'm going to stop there. Are there any questions or comments? So I invite the people on faculty council to read the documents carefully. Of course, these documents are going to be shared with everybody in the faculty, but this is an important change. It took quite a long time to develop this version of the code because as we tried to make it very detailed, we got pushback that it was too detailed. And in the end, we decided to really make a document that encompasses the policies and procedures that exist in the university already to avoid any ambiguity between what applies in the Faculty of Medicine and what applies elsewhere. It's all the same. So I think everyone is exhausted, but I have one more important piece of business. So this is for information, right? My team? So it's for information. This is not for decision because it's actually not under the faculty council that makes this decision. But we thought it was important to let people know. So this is related to the MI4 initiative. Some of you will know about the something or other department, inter-infectious, and that one. So I call it MI4. I can't remember all the different parts. And the idea is to take the AIDS Center, which was created in 1990 at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic. For younger people, there was an AIDS epidemic. It's still an important disease, and to rename it in honor of Mark Wainberg. So all of you should know that Mark Wainberg was the director of the AIDS Center, but he was also an extremely prominent scientist and advocate on behalf of AIDS patients. So on the one hand, he played a crucial role in the discovery of 3TC and the development of modern treatment of HIV. And on the other hand, as president of the International AIDS Society and in other ways, he was an incredibly fearless and rather aggressive advocate for patients with AIDS, and was not afraid to stand up in front of presidents of certain countries and tell them what he thought of them, and was really one of the most remarkable people who ever worked at McGill, as far as I can see, in the sense that he brought together scientific excellence with advocacy and humanism at a level that is rarely achieved by most of us. And so that's the proposal. I don't know if anybody, the idea would now be to expand beyond HIV/AIDS to look at viral disease that are emerging. And as all of you know, Ebola, dengue, Zika, influenza, HPV, and others are all creating enormous burdens of disease that need addressing. Cheng, do you want to say anything more? You're the interim leader.
Yeah, I think you covered the sense of this proposal.
Use the microphone, please.
Yeah, I think you have covered the sense of this proposal, and this is for two reasons, as you said. One is to remember Mark for his contribution. The other one is to really expand the mandate of the center to cover not only HIV, but all the important viral diseases. Yeah.
Okay. And so we've already gotten these, there's a team working on this. So, no less than Tony Fauci of the NIAID and Françoise Barré-Sinoussi, a Nobel laureate, have endorsed this. So we have really fantastic support for this from outside the university. I'm sure it will sail through, but we thought it was important to bring it to the attention of Faculty Council. I don't know if anybody has any comments, questions. So, fortunately, you'll be glad to know I'm almost finished speaking. So I only have one thing left to do, which is to, I was told, how many slides? Where's Jason? We have about 20 slides of kudos. So I'm not going to read them all out, but I am going to show them so you get an idea that we have people in the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences. We have the usual Dean of Medicine Excellence Awards. We have Royal College Awards. We have Royal Society of Canada, new members. We have Pediatric Academic Clinician Investigator Awards, National Brain, the Margulies Award for Dr. Turecki, and so on. Dr. Hales, who's sitting here, got the Agnish Fellowship in the Teratology Society. And you can see local awards inside our faculty, the David Thompson Award, the Osler Award, people awarded to the Order of Canada, the Faculty Honor List for Educational Excellence, yet more awards related to the Department of Medicine. Philippe Gros was promoted to the Chevalier of the Ordre National du Québec, as Phil Gold was promoted to Grand Officier, and he also got an honorary doctorate. Dr. Evans got the Glass Brain Award, and the Canadian Public Health Society also recognized somebody. Canada Research Chairs, a lot of them. Prix d'Excellence from the Canadian Council for Advancement of Education, the gold medal for community outreach, best use of video, and so on. We have the CLIC Awards. These are awards for innovation within the Faculty of Medicine. And the Coup de Cœur des Ministres for the Opal smartphone app, and the Prix d'Excellence de Réseau de la Santé et de Services Sociaux for Controlling Specific Infection Successful Strategies team. The Governor General of Canada Award for Volunteers to one of our students. The Jacques Genet Award twice. Charles Frost Award in the Department of Pharmacology, so Pharmacology Awards. The Canadian Hall of Fame Award to Léanne Roncière. And it goes on. There's Canadian Student Health Research Awards. And the AIDS Society Conference Dominique Dormeau Award, these are AIDS awards, as well as the Défi Us Entreprendre for the Community Health and Social Medicine Incubator for CHASM. And with that, I have gone through the 20 slides relatively quickly, mispronouncing people's names and saying things too fast. That brings us to the end of the Faculty Council meeting. I'm not even, we have a motion to adjourn. I love doing that. Nobody, yes, Dr. Gagnon, anybody want to second that? Dr. Robert, and anybody against? No, if not, I think we're going to adjourn. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a great afternoon. Oh, we finished 12 minutes early. Please hand in your name cards. Thank you.